Hello, and welcome back to my channel. How have you been? You look good. You look so good. Are you eating differently? You look great. My goodness, January, I feel like January flew by, but also I looked at some of the books I read at the beginning of January and I barely remember. It seems like it was a year ago. I don't know. January was wild. But here we are, and it's the end of January, and so I'm going to go through everything that I read in January. We'll talk about each of them in no particular order, what I thought, and all of that fun stuff. And of course, before we get started, please make sure to like and subscribe and hit all the buttons that do the things, because I guess that's helpful, right? I don't even know. Let's just talk about some books. All right, so first up, I read All Systems Red. This is the first book in the Murderbot series by Martha Wells. This has been recommended to me a bajillion times. I actually bought the box set just so I could read all of them. And I don't know. I kind of expected to be like blown away, and I don't know that I loved it. I didn't find it that funny. I know a lot of people think that it's very humorous, and I am going to read at least one more before I fully decide. But I don't know. I read it and I got to the end of it and I was like, you know, when somebody hypes something up and you're like, oh right, this is going to be good, and then you watch it, you get to the very end, you're like, where was the good part? I don't know. I just felt like this really did not do it for me, and I think it's an interesting story. I get why people like the Murderbot as a character and very sarcastic and kind of doesn't want to work, and I get it. I just wish I got it more. You know what I mean? But I'm not going to completely read it off. I am going to read the next one in the series. They're very short, which is nice. I'm going to read the next one in the series just to see if maybe I vibe with it more the second time around, knowing kind of what I'm getting into. So let me know your thoughts. Are you a Murderbot fan? Do you think I should stick with it? What do you think? Let me know. All right, next up, I read this one. I read several books this month for various book clubs on Fable, and I will link my book club down below. We're going to be reading a really great book in February. We read a really great book in January. This was for a different book club. This was for the Diversity and Amplify book club. So this is The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida, and this book was a trip, and I really liked it, but it was a wild book. So this is the story of Maali Almeida, who has died, and he basically has 7 moons to kind of figure out how he died and kind of figure out what his life meant. It's very cerebral. There are several parts of this book where it felt almost like you're reading philosophy, like you're reading a philosophy book and not an actual story. And I think what's great, what I really like, is that Maali Almeida is a very unlikable character. In life, he just was the worst. And yet you really feel for him, and you feel for his friends, and you feel for his plight, and you want him to succeed, even though he was really the worst. But there's so many cool, the way that the afterlife is described in this book is so interesting and so captivating. And even when sometimes I got a little lost and didn't quite know what was going on, I still was just so invested in what was happening. Just a really, really, really cool book. And definitely similar story-wise to things that I've read in the past, but completely different than things I've read in the past that are anything like this. Told in second person, which I thought was very cool. It just was really cool. I feel like I'm not smart enough to describe how good it was. But I really enjoyed it a lot, and I definitely think it takes a really deep dive look at, what about our lives matter, what about our deaths matter, what really counts as far as the human experience. This was just phenomenal. So good. If I have one complaint, and I do have one small complaint, the chapters are so long. Just each moon is a chapter. So basically this entire book is 8 chapters with the ending chapter. So 8 chapters. They're so long. And I like easily digestible chapters, because I'm someone that has a really hard time stopping mid-chapter, but I had to do that several times in this book because they were so long. But other than that, fantastic. It also has to do a lot with Sri Lanka. Kind of goes into the history of Sri Lanka in some really interesting ways, and that actually forced me to look up some information and learn a little bit about Sri Lanka, which I really knew nothing about. So that was really cool as well. So this was excellent. Highly recommend. For another book club, I read the first book of The Vampire Academy. I think this is just called The Vampire Academy. Oh boy, wow, this book is very much a product of its time for sure. Oh, the angsty teen drama. So it's ridiculous. And it feels, I mean, it didn't come out that long ago, but it feels like it's aged not great. And there definitely was things that, like, if you were to put them in a book today, people would be like, ooh, that's problematic. Did I have fun reading it? Absolutely. Do I think that it was good? No, I don't think so. But there is something to be said about a book that is just like pure chaotic fun. And I will say the whole time I was reading it, I was like, I don't know that I'm really into this. I mean, I think I've talked about this before on all of my channels and that I'm just not a huge vampire fan. But I got to the end, I was like, damn it, I need to read the next one. I need to know what happens next. It's wild. And some of the story elements, like there's this whole, it's told through the perspective of one of the characters, and she can like, she has a bond with the other character and she can like see into her mind basically. And it's really just there to fill in the blanks of the story. It's like a literary device. And that's the only reason it exists in the book. Was this good? No. But was it fun? Yes, it was a fun book to read. Yes. A friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine, she has decided to read a classic every single month this year. And I told her, I'll do it. I'll read a classic with you every single month. Let's do it. Just tell me what we're reading and we're reading it. So this month we read Frankenstein, which I've never read before. And if you've seen me post about this on my other channels, this book was so gay. I've read modern day like MLM like gay books like this was gayer than Heartstopper. What? I was surprised at how very different this was from the other versions of Frankenstein that I've seen. Now, I am not a Frankenstein aficionado. Like my most notable, when I think of Frankenstein, the first movie that comes to my head is Young Frankenstein, like the Mel Brooks version of Frankenstein. So I don't have a lot to go on here, but this was very different than what I was expecting. It's definitely got like exactly what you think of with classics. Like there's a lot of just like going on and on and on and on and about, my life is tragedy and I'm so vexed by there's a lot of that. There's a lot of turmoil. There's a lot of angst. It's beautifully written. It's absolutely gorgeous in its writing. So I'll say that. I didn't love it. I mean, I'm not really a classics person, and I don't think I've read enough classics post high school, like in my current reading life, to really appreciate them fully. But I had fun reading it, and I had fun discussing it with a friend, and I'm glad to say that I can now read it, because for so long people are like, you haven't read Frankenstein? What? And so now I've read it. It did not blow my mind the way I thought it might, but I definitely am glad I read it, because it was very interesting to see how this story has evolved thanks to Hollywood. Like, it's so different than what we are really shown as what this story is in its initial form. And it was exciting to see like the birth of all that. So yeah, Frankenstein. This month for Easy Cats Book Club, my book club, we read Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And oh, wow, this is easily one of my favorite books I've ever read. It's so good. I said this to some friends of mine that were also reading it, that I think this is the most I have ever related to a book. The book has to do with two friends who decide to make a video game together, and they end up starting a video game company together. And really it's about their relationship, and their friendship is very toxic. Both of them are dealing with a lot of things, and they kind of take a lot of that out on each other. They're not very good at communicating with each other. And so you kind of see how all of that develops within this company and within their lives. And it's just really beautiful. The way that the book talks about disability, the way that the book talks about depression, I really saw myself in a lot of those moments. And I think it's funny because, doing it in the book club, I see a lot of people that were like, these characters were so bad for each other, and it was completely unrealistic how bad they are for each other and how toxic their relationship is. And as someone who, deals with a physical disability and also deals with depression, I would read those comments and be like, it's not that unrealistic. Because if you deal with those things in your real life, I think it does feel very realistic. The way that those things can come between people and the way that those things can develop. And Sadie in particular, so many people are like, I don't like Sadie. And it's interesting to me how, we talk about mental health awareness and we talk about the importance of talking about mental health. But as soon as a character is displaying like very obvious signs of depression, I was surprised at how many people were quick to write her off and just be like, oh, she's a horrible person, right? Like, I can't stand her. When really, she's just horribly depressed, and she, you know, that kind of informs a lot of her decisions and a lot of the ways that she thinks in her life. And watching how readers had no patience for that was, and that's not to say anything bad about those readers, because everybody reads with their own life experience, right? So if you've never experienced someone like this, or you've never had this experience in your life, of course you're not going to see that in the text, but seeing people's reaction in that way to her character was very interesting to me as someone who, you know, constantly, you know, I think about mental health a lot, and I know we talk about it a lot on the internet. It was interesting to see the reaction people had to that. But I wanted to play every single video game that was talked about in this book. Every single one. They all sounded fantastic. I just really loved this book. I tabbed it like crazy. I adored it. One of my favorite books I've read in a while, and one of my favorite books I've read ever. So Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. Very good. Definitely depressing. Definitely a book that will make you cry. But I really, that being said, I really loved where the book ended. So, yeah. Next up, Kaiju Preservation Society by John Scalzi. This is my first John Scalzi novel, though I've had a couple others recommended to me. This is the story of a man who loses his job, ends up like doing food delivery during COVID, and then gets recruited to go work in this like secret organization that helps preserve kaiju, giant monsters. This is great. It's really fun. It's really lighthearted. It does not take itself too seriously, but it takes itself just seriously enough. It's just a really fun read. It is not a literary masterpiece. It's not gonna make you think too much. It's really just like a light, easy, fun, kind of goofy read. I love kaiju. I love like kaiju stories, and this also has like some Jurassic Park elements. It's really, really fun. Yeah, it was not a 5-star for me because, like I said, it wasn't like life-changing literature, but it's just a really enjoyable light read. I think if you're looking for something fun to like get out of a reading slump, or you just need like a light, like maybe if I read this, I think after I finished Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, or right around then, and it was a nice like palate cleanser from dealing with something like so heavy. This was a nice light read to kind of get me out of those vibes. So this was really good, and I read it because I had bought it and it wasn't on my TBR, but I saw a review where a bunch of people were talking about how it was too woke, and that made me want to read it because I was like, oh, sign me up, because if it's too woke, it usually means that it has like a diverse cast and like good morals. So I was like, yeah, I'll read that. And I guess it's because the cast is somewhat diverse. I don't, but that being said, I don't know where they got that from this. I get corporations and people with money are kind of evil, but is that controversial? I don't know. I really liked this book a lot. Kaiju Preservation Society. What a ramble we just went on. I didn't read a lot of manga this month, so I just threw the two of them that I read in this pile. So I read the first book of The Tower of God. This was weird. In a good way. It deals with this guy who ends up kind of going to this tower that has like multiple levels of challenges, and you kind of have to move up the tower to be able to like get what you want. And it's very interesting so far. I am definitely going to be picking up book 2. It's very hard to describe because it's just a very weird, crazy story. Kind of Hunger Games-ish, I guess. Hunger Games-ish, except like much crazier than that. But I did enjoy it. So Tower of God. Oh, and the book, at least in the US, I don't know how anywhere else, but it is in full color, which is pretty cool. Next up, I read Look Back. This is from the author of Chainsaw Man. It is, I believe, standalone, and it deals with 2 young people kind of learning to do art and figuring out like what art means to them, and like getting kind of into manga and doing manga as an art form. I imagine that this is, well, it's a story of growing up. I would imagine that some of it is autobiographical, though I could be wrong. And just really beautiful. It's very short. It's a very short read by the author of Chainsaw Man. I thought it was actually better. I mean, I think Chainsaw Man is great, but it was fun to see this author do something more serious and more poignant, and just like a more serious coming of age story. It was nice to see the author do something different. So I really liked this. This was Look Back. Next up, we have our next Discworld novel. So, as some of you know, I am working on reading every single Discworld novel. So this month I read Witches Abroad. And this turned out to be my favorite of the Discworld novels so far. It's so good. I think if you've been watching my Discworld stuff, or you've just been thinking about getting into Discworld, this would be a great place. You could easily just pick this book up and read it by itself. But essentially, it's this, imagine if the Golden Girls were witches, and they decided to take and one of them basically became inherited the wand of a fairy godmother. So now they get a quest, and they have to go on like a road trip through a whole bunch of different fairy tales. That's what this book is. And if you're not sold by now, I don't know what to tell you. It's so good. It's so funny. It is chaotically funny. And the story is just really well put together. Easily my favorite Terry Pratchett Discworld book that I've read so far. Hands down. This was just a delight. A delight. It was so funny. There were moments that had me cackling like a crazy person. Like, my husband and my cats looked at me like I was crazy. So good. My favorite so far, Witches Abroad. If you've been thinking about getting into Discworld, try this one out and see if you like it. The next one is going to be a challenge. So I read, this was for another book club. I read A Broken Blade. This, when it originally came out, it was this big, like, so if you've never heard of this book, it was a big book talk phenomenon. So basically the author sent this book to a bunch of book talkers, and the author at the time was anonymous, right? And so I even have the anonymous version because I was sent one of the copies. And so a bunch of us opened the book, and then there were like clues, and we were trying to figure out who was the author, and it was like this whole thing, right? So I finally got around to reading the book. I did not get around to reading it when it first like dropped and everybody was excited about it. There was just too much going on. Finally got around to reading it this month, and I really didn't like it, unfortunately. It is very classic YA, so I think if you just like very light, kind of classic, no really risks taken young adult fantasy, you actually might like it. Like, it's kind of in the realm of like Assassin's Blade or things like that. It's very much in line with all of those. You know, there's a girl and she's the best assassin that's ever been an assassin, but she works for she works for the throne, and the throne is evil, and it's got a lot of tropes. Like, it very much was made to be a book that like is a bunch of things that Book Talk really likes. It's even dedicated to Book Talk. I have no doubt. I mean, there are a lot of people who have picked this up and really enjoyed it, but for me, it was a no. I really did not like the writing style at all. There were so many moments where it just felt like over-explainy and repetitive, and there was just so much of the book where I felt like nothing was happening. I will say by the end, I did end up liking some of the characters, and I even liked some of the character moments that happened towards the end, and even the romance in the book, I did like that as well. The writing was so challenging to get through. I'm really hoping now that the author is working with a publisher that they will do a little bit more editing in the second book, because I think there's a glimmer of something good here, but the book could have used a couple more rounds, I feel like. And one thing I will say is, the book deals with it deals with alcoholism, and it also deals with some like self-harm stuff. And the self-harm stuff I can't really speak to too much, but I will say with the alcoholism part, it felt almost laughable how the alcoholism was represented in the book. Like, you almost wanted to laugh at it, and I really found that problematic, because it's meant to be like a problem that the main character Kira has like a drinking problem, but the way it's presented is like almost offensively bad from a like alcoholism standpoint. And that really threw me off. So the first half of the book, that was brought up a lot. Like, at one point, I swear there was a chapter where every single paragraph, it was brought up that she was drinking in some way. Like, that's how the alcoholism was shown. And so it was very jarring, and it was very distracting, and I really didn't like that aspect of it. So like I said, it's a mixed bag. There's some good here. There's some stuff I really didn't like. I might read the sequel. When I finish this, I said I will not read the sequel. But the more I think about it, the more I wonder if the sequel will have a little bit better editing. There's more people kind of working on it now. There's more expectation. So I might give it a try if I hear that it's better than the first book, but this one was not for me, unfortunately. Next up, I read the first book of Lockwood & Co. This is The Screaming Staircase. I really liked this. This also just came out as a show on Netflix. That's kind of why I wanted to read it before that came out. So this is about like a young adult or like young middle grade or older middle grade young adult book about young people who fight ghosts. And I love ghost fighting stories, and this was just really great. The characters are really interesting. The case that they worked on was really interesting. I really love when young adult stuff gets actually spooky and actually creepy and scary, and this definitely had some like actual like haunted house spooky moments. I really like the world building. Like, I really like how they have to fight the ghost and the different tools they use to fight the ghost. And there's actually like a murder mystery in the story, and I really like how that was all put together. This is great, and I ordered the second book. I'm excited to read it, but this was just a lot of fun. And I think if you like ghost hunting type stuff, or like you know, I love stuff like Ghost Hunters or Ghost Files or things like that. This is kind of like young adult, scarier Ghost Files or Ghost Hunters. And so for me, it was a total win. So really enjoyed this a lot. Next up, I read Star Wars: The High Republic Into the Dark. Now, you know, you may have heard either from my TikTok or my YouTube video from last month that I'm trying to read through all of The High Republic, get caught up with the series, and I really did not like the first book. I didn't like the first book so much so that when it first came out, I read it, and then I kind of gave up on The High Republic. But I decided I wanted to give it a second chance. So even though I didn't like the first book in The High Republic, I reread it, still didn't like it, and then jumped into this. This is the first of the YA books, and it's technically the second book in the High Republic, but I really liked this. This was really fun. It deals with a young Jedi who is trying to go join his master, kind of in the wilds of space, but then all of the stuff that happens in the first book happens, and he gets stranded with a bunch of other characters, and they end up going to like an abandoned space station, and they have to sort of figure out what's going on, and there's something dark and sinister happening. In a weird way, it reminded me of Gideon the Ninth, which you guys know I love. It was not as good as Gideon the Ninth, and it was not as like trippy and wild as Gideon the Ninth, but there are definitely like some hints of that there. Or if you've if you've played the video game Dead Space, there are also like some hints of that in here. I really liked this. This was a lot of fun. This like gave me hope for continuing on with the High Republic, because the first book, no. But this was awesome. This was just such a fun ride from start to finish, and I really loved the side characters. I'm not a huge fan of like Jedi stories because I feel like they can feel a little samey, but there are multiple Jedis in this, and they all have like very different personalities and very different kind of like life missions. That's the best way I can say it without spoiling, which made them all really interesting characters. And so I loved that. Yeah, this definitely gives me hope going further. It's a new hope. Oh, okay. I get really excited. This definitely gives me hope going into more of the High Republic stuff in the near future. So if you've been following me on my other socials, you know that this past month I got a Kindle and immediately downloaded some spicy books. And the first one I read, not expecting anything of it, was Prince of Flowers. And you're saying, well, you read it on your Kindle. What are you doing with your hand? I liked this so much that I ended up ordering a physical copy for my bookshelf. Look at this man. This ended up being great. This is sort of like, so it's about this guy named Locke, and he is trying to like complete his basically last mission to become a professional summoner. So he goes out in the woods and he's like trying to like form a bond with something he feels on the wind, and it ends up being a Fey prince, right? And they really don't like each other. It's got that enemies to lovers, but then they start working together, and you know how things go. But it just was so fun. So yes, it is like an MLM romance. Yes, it does have some spicy scenes, though not very many, and definitely towards the end of the book. So it only has like 2 like spicy scenes, and they're towards the end of the book. They're very tasteful. But the rest of the book has like magic. It has really cool world building. It has a lot of aspects that if you've played like Pokemon or Persona or Castlevania, it's got a lot of aspects from like you can tell that Nazri Noor, who wrote this, is a gamer. Like you could just tell because there's a lot of that built into the book. I ended up thinking that this was just great. Like, even like take out the yes, there are some spicy bits, but I would read this even as just like a fantasy romance. Like, it was really, 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 really good. And it was a very light, easy, fun read. It just completely took me by surprise. I saw this and I was like, this is gonna be trash, but I'm gonna love it anyway. And it ended up being really fun, and I ended up loving it anyway. So. Yeah, this was, and it is on Kindle Unlimited. So if you want to check it out, you can do so through the old Kindle. But this was great, and I already downloaded the second book, and I can't wait to read it. So there you go. All right, we have just 2 books left. Just today, the last book that I'll finish for the month is The Genesis of Misery by Neon Yang. Now, I had read some of Neon Yang's other stuff, and that's why I was like, oh, I want to check this out. I feel like I'm still digesting this book. It's essentially a sci-fi retelling of Joan of Arc. And the concept and the idea behind the book, I think, might be the best thing about the book. The actual writing and the actual presentation of the story, I didn't love. Like, if you don't like books that do a lot more telling than showing, then this book is not for you. Like, this book is like 98.5% telling you things and like 1.5% actually things happening. It was a rough read. I think there are people, just like Gideon the Ninth, I think there are people that are going to absolutely adore this book. And it has a lot of cool things going for it, right? Like, it has a really interesting, like, world built, like, sci-fi world. It has a sapphic romance in it, which I think is really cool. Though I will say, there is a romantic scene between 3 characters. And it is maybe the most boring romantic scene between three characters that I've ever read in my life. Like, as it's happening, they're like discussing politics. And like others, I'm like, whoa. What is this? What is this? No, but and also they're having this like full on discussion. I'm like, I don't think that's how that would go. Am I blushing yet? Oh my god. But yeah, I liked the beginning. I liked the ending. There's just like a lot of like, there's a lot of waiting for things to happen and then nothing actually happening in this book, I feel like. So it's hard. Like I said, I think there are people that are going to like eat this up and be like, yes, this is so cool. This is what I'm looking for. And I think there are good reasons for that. I just wish there was a little bit more. I wish I liked it more. One other aspect I will say that really threw me for a loop with this book. So first of all, this sounds like something really cool and really good. So every single character, when they're introduced, is introduced with their pronouns, which I thought was really cool because then it like introduced some other pronouns and it felt very inclusive. I think that's great, but my issue is that many characters were introduced with just their pronouns. Like, the only description of the character was their name and their pronouns, and then we just launched right into what we were doing. And as a reader, I want more. I want more description of characters than just their gender identity. Does that make sense? Like, I think it's really awesome that was included, but I wish it wasn't the only way that we learned about each character. Does that make sense? Like, I need to know, like, this is Tom, and he goes by he, him, and also he has brown hair, and he likes to wear fancy shoes. I don't know. I need a little bit more than just a gender to really, like, feel like I can envision and see a character in a book. And this book did that kind of often, and it was a little bit distracting. So I'll just put that out there as well. All right, last book of the month. I want to say that a lot of you already know about that I read this book because I did a whole series about it on TikTok and Instagram. But I read Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, and not only that, but I promise, probably not till I get back from my trip to LA, which I'm about to go on, but I will do a full video about all of this. But I essentially annotated this entire book. I drew like tons of pictures on different pages. I really turned this book like into a piece of art. Like, I had a really good time like doodling and drawing and making this book kind of special. So as I would read, I would annotate and I would draw and I would doodle and I do little things of the scenes in the books. And like I said, I'll do a full video about like my process and the tools I used. And, I did like full scenes on certain pages and, highlighting and annotating. And then when I was done, I actually colored the sides. So hold on, I'm going to hold it back here so you can see it. But I did like clouds and lightning on the top, and then I did the Empire State Building and then water on the bottom. So I painted the edges when I was done. Obviously, I loved it. This was technically my first read of Percy Jackson. I have read this book before, but it's been so long that I did not remember a single thing about it. So I'm calling it a first read. This was just an incredible experience, being able to annotate and color and just do this in this way. I did most of these annotations on live streams, so that was really fun. I loved the story. I loved the characters. I can't wait to get further into this world. I love the interpretation of these Greek stories into modern day. Like, it just all worked so well. It was all so good. Annabeth, Grover, and Percy are just delightful. They're great characters. This was one of the coolest reading experiences I've had in a long time. Not just reading this book, but doing everything that I did with, annotating and creating this book that is now, very special and like a completely original, like me copy of this book that has all of these great moments that I got to like bring to life. I don't know. It's really special. So this was awesome. This was my favorite reading experience of this month for sure. Like, this was just so fun. And that is everything that I read in January. I didn't seem like I read as much in January, but apparently I read a lot in January. So here we are. Let me know what you thought of all of these. Let me know if you have a different opinion on one of the books. Please let me know. If you have the same opinion on one of the books, let me know. If you saw a book here that you would like to check out yourself, that you're like, oh, I'm going to check that out now, let me know that too. Like I said, at some point this month, probably in the next couple of weeks, because I'm going to be traveling to LA for 2 weeks, I will be doing a YouTube video fully going over my annotation process for Percy Jackson, because a lot of people have requested a deeper dive, longer video for that. But if you are interested in at least seeing some of it, you can see that on both my Instagram and my TikTok pages, because I've highlighted that a lot on those pages over the past month. I have a really great TBR for February. I can't wait to share all of those books with you. There's going to be just some really cool stuff in there. Some stuff that I've recently gotten, some stuff that I've had for a while that has just been waiting on my TBR to be read. Some more Discworld, some more Percy Jackson. Our classic for February is going to be Pride and Prejudice, which I've never read, so I think that's going to be a lot of fun. Just a lot of good things coming up. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome day. Make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. And of course, happy reading.